I've been browsing, treading water that they drowning. My head on a swivel, yeah. It's only really my surroundings.
Hello and welcome to episode 36 of the Smash Accept podcast. I'm your host, Michael Royer. You can find me on Twitter at Dynasty_DadFF. Joining me is part of our Smash Accept roundtable. You know, it's been a while here, Mung, but I'm excited. You know, it's been 2 weeks. We had a little bit of time off there, but we have a special St. Patrick's Day. I'm rocking my green, you know, trying to have a little bit of fun because I look Irish, but I'm not. Mung, how you been?
Good. Happy St. Patty's. My grandma's birthday is this week too. So along with free agency, just a ton going on, but happy to be back and talking some football.
So you dropping some dimes about free agency to your grandma, trying to help her out with her fantasy team, or what do you got planned for grandma this week?
She's actually she's more of an NBA fan, so she's a big Chicago Bulls fan. So
nice.
I'm sure I don't know how much about March Madness that's coming up too. So this week is just jam packed.
I love it. And joining us again, we're privileged to have Jeremy. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. I'm just kind of same thing. St. Patrick's Day, just kind of a lot of stuff going on. I mean, the free agent pool's kind of just left and right, guys getting signed and just craziness.
Yeah, you're a busy guy lately. I mean, your podcast is starting out. I mean, why don't you tell people what you have going on?
Me and my co-host Ryan Mackey, who is Mackey_FFB on Twitter, started up a podcast. It is the Fantasy Football Playmakers. We usually go live every Monday at 8, and then it's on any normal streaming app that you can get. Other than that, I just actually went on with the sports gambling podcast. I just joined on as a writer there. On top of that, I have some stuff at Yards Per mostly, and I actually kind of have some small amount of content with the Fantasy Scouts, kind of just tossing a couple articles their way too.
I love it. You know, keep grinding. These are two guys that if you do not follow them on Twitter, you should be, because both of them guys always putting out a lot of content. Mung, anything going on with Fantrax lately?
Yeah, I know we're in the midst of free agency, a lot of big signings, but I've finally had time to look into this rookie class, so I will be dropping my rookie rankings fairly soon in the next week or two. You guys can always find them on Fantrax, or just look out for my tweets at FFA_Mung. That's MENG.
I love it. So it's been crazy, right? I mean, the free agency has been fast and furious. I feel like, you know, this time last year, we were all worried about COVID. Is there going to be a football season? It was a lot of indecision, you know. Now we're just excited, right? I mean, there's so much content coming on right now. There's so many guys signing left and right, deals that we're trying to figure out. And we really want to put this out there for you guys, the listener, of what you should be doing with some of these free agents and what these signings mean, and not only the signings, but some of the lack of signings or the positions that have opened up. So we're just going to go division by division. We're going to hit you with the pertinent signings, and we're going to talk about what that means for your fantasy team. So starting right off in the AFC East, Buffalo won the division last year. You know, it's been New England's forever, and New England's really made a splash. But Buffalo makes a couple, you know, low-key signings here. Darrell Williams, you know, John Feliciano, so beefing up that offensive line. Then they go and sign Emmanuel Sanders to a one-year deal. Josh Allen has made himself a top 3 to 5 dynasty startup pick in Superflex leagues. And really, Buffalo just added another veteran presence there. Gabriel Davis has looked good. Diggs has been phenomenal. Beasley's in there. Mung, what do you think of the Emmanuel Sanders signing? You know, one-year deal, not really any kind of commitment there, but they get themselves a nice veteran presence.
Yeah, I think this is one of those signings, much like I believe I said Sanders to New Orleans last year, is a good signing for the team. For fantasy, I'm not going to be on Sanders at all. I know there are some Gabriel Davis truthers out there who, you know, kind of went on an emotional roller coaster this week, first with the John Brown release and then with the Sanders signing. But I think the arrow is still pointing up on Davis. I wouldn't be too worried. And then also, I think they're talking about, you know, adding a tight end. So now might be a good time to see if you can get an early third or so for Dawson Knox.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hearing Gronk potentially coming back to that Buffalo area. Jeremy, let's take a look at both these wide receivers. What are you willing to pay for Gabriel Davis? Is now the time to go buy him, because some people might think the Sanders signing eats into a little bit. And then on the flip side, what would you pay for Emmanuel Sanders? If you're a contender, is he even worth throwing something out there right now?
I think Davis, I think I've seen some stuff that a lot of people are saying he kind of dropped to that more mid to late second round value for them. And I kind of agree with that. I wouldn't pay too much more than that. He obviously has a potential to take over the wide receiver 2 position, but he's going to have to beat out Sanders. And there's going to be too much risk to pay much more than a second. A second I feel comfortable with, because either way, the Bills were second in the NFL in running 4 wide receiver sets. So either way, I think both of them will be on the field a decent amount. I think you'll see John Brown's snap count get split up, and I think Gabriel Davis will see some more than what he had last year, and I think Emmanuel Sanders will get used. They didn't just go out and sign him not to use him. Yeah. So, and I think he's still fairly effective. I don't think he's going to dig completely into Davis, and as far as Sanders, I probably would pay almost maybe an early third. I mean, I'm not really looking to grab Sanders personally, just because I don't know what he's going to be in the offense. Is he the 4th receiver? Is he the 2nd receiver? You know what I mean? Like, where is he going to really play out? I think he's one of those guys that he'd be worth it to pay it in the season. Do you know what I mean? Because you're going to know his role a little better. So it might be more expensive, but versus giving, like, say, a third now, because everybody's going to be like, oh my God, he's on a high passing volume team. These guys, he's going to produce like crazy. So people probably have a higher value on him now than what you're willing to pay, risking the fact that he might not get that volume.
Yeah, I like that. And that's I talk about running the most 4 wide receiver sets. I mean, I think I purchased Gabriel Davis this morning for 2/3 because someone was selling on a discount. I feel like that's smash accept all day. If you can buy him for a late second for the kind of flash that he had. And Sanders, if you're in a rebuild, I feel like if you get some 3rd round capital, some early thirds, this class is going to be great. John and I are going on after this with Angelo from Angelo Analysis, going to talk about some of these wide receiver classes. And the more I jump into these wide receivers, I mean, it is a deep class, and I'm excited for some of these guys coming out. Let's move over to Miami here real quick. Not a lot of exciting things. We signed Jacoby Brissett for a 1-year, $5 million contract. Malcolm Brown signs, not a lot of things. But, Mung, I think it's the idea that Aaron Jones isn't coming to Miami, right? Miami – your guy, Myles Gaskin, got it one more step closer to a little bit more relevance.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily go that far. I think it's kind of the calm before the storm, because if anything, the lack of activity in free agency probably foreshadows, Javonte Williams or, someone in the draft. They have a ton of draft capital in the first 3 rounds, and I expect them to add a running back. So I think Gaskin will still be a good complementary back, perhaps even the lead. But if anyone thinks that he's going to be that workhorse that he was last year, I would probably pump the brakes a little bit on that.
Yeah. Moving to New England, this is where all the magic happened, right? So Cam Newton signs, that 1-year deal worth up to $13.6 million. Basically, it's an $8 million contract. So he signed a good backup money. He didn't sign crazy startup money or starter money. So we're talking about it's startup season. I got that thrown out there. The Smash Accept Listener League 2 just finished. The 25th round just went off today. So I might be throwing some of those things in there. But, Cam Newton, last year, he had 12 rushing touchdowns. That was fantastic, Cam. The 8 passing touchdowns. He just doesn't look like the same guy. But now, you see these memes all over the place of Bill Belichick, like, Tom Brady won a Super Bowl. Let's spend some money. Just take my money, And they go and they sign Nelson Aguilar to a 2-year, $26 million deal. Kendrick Bourne, 3 years, 22. Hunter Henry, 3 years, 37. Jonnu Smith, now the 3rd highest paid tight end in the league, 4 years, $50 million. They get Trent Brown in a trade. They're really starting to try to beef up that offense. But are they? I mean, what are we thinking here? I'm going to start with you, Jeremy. Talk to me about this New England offense. James White's obviously on his way out. There's rumor they're trying to sign Leonard Fournette and try to be a little bit more smash-mouth football. But what do you think of some of these signings?
I mean, I think it takes me back. I'm a Bills fan. I'm from Buffalo, so I've dealt with that entire saga of the Tom Brady's won the most games than Ralph Wilson. So I think it just reminds me of like what they were for a while in the early 2010 range there, where they had Gronk and they had Hernandez with just a cast of, I mean, they had Randy Moss for a little while, but just this cast of low end talent, quote unquote, wide receivers who just kind of, they're going to get the scraps from the tight ends and they're going to focus on those two tight ends. They didn't just go spend $80 million to not throw to Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry. I think they're going to try and they're not going to be Gronk and they're not going to be Hernandez. It's probably not going to be that prolific, but I think that's their goal. I think they saw Cam Newton can't really stretch the field last year. And I think knowing they're bringing him back, that they're let's focus on the middle of the field. Let's get the ball on these short passes to say Jonnu Smith and allow him to use his yak ability and create some plays that way. And I think with the Fournette signing, I think they're just going to go back to that running back by committee that they've always had. That's just how they've always ran that backfield. And I think it's going to take, if they do get Fournette, it's going to be a hit there for Damian Harris. And I believe Sony Michel's still under contract. So it's just going to, I think, be one of those guessing games. And I honestly, for me, I actually took Hunter Henry in the listener league and I took Devin Asiasi. So now I have the entire tight end room. So that didn't work out well, but I just think that I'm going to stay away from these guys as much as I can. I know it's probably sounds surprising, but I just feel like they both fall almost out of tight end one position because it's going to be a guessing game. I'm sure week after week, it's just going to be, is it going to be Henry that's the tight end one, or is it going to be Jonnu Smith? Yeah. And then for the receivers, they're probably valuable in a deeper league that you're running maybe 3, 4, 5 wide receivers in. They might have some value. I just feel like it's going to be too much of a guessing game for me.
Exactly. I mean, I feel like you still got Edelman in the mix. I got him in the 24th round of the last draft that we were doing, so it's kind of a dicey situation there. Mung, you and I have been talking Jonnu Smith all offseason. I don't own a single share of Jonnu Smith. And then in Listener League 2, I took him in the 9th round. I'm like, and I couldn't be happier when he got signed. And then Hunter Henry got signed right after that. So I'm like, Jonnu's going to break out. He's literally the number one target there in New England. And then Hunter Henry comes to town. Talk to me about this tight end situation a little bit.
Yeah, I'm actually pretty enthused still by both tight ends, and here's why. They're building all this talent along the offensive line. They have the 2 tight ends that they really wanted. They maybe overpaid based on, the actual deals, but everything seems to me is set up for Belichick expecting to have a rookie quarterback on a cheap contract for the next 4 or 5 years. That's what it feels like to me. And I do think whether it's at pick number 15 or if they even trade up a few spots from there, depending on what happens, I expect them to draft a Trey Lance, a Mac Jones, probably not going to be able to trade up to that top 2 spot. But outside of there, I do think that they're looking to make a move at quarterback. So I'm not worried, because I like the 2 tight ends in that system, in that Josh McDaniels schemed offense. They want to be this ground and pound game, but with the play action tight ends that can stretch the field. And that's exactly what those 2 give you. Jonnu more so than Hunter Henry. But to me, this is another classic example of Belichick kind of zagging while the rest of the teams are zigging, right? The league is moving towards a pass-heavy, smaller guys, and that means smaller cornerbacks and smaller linebackers. So how do you beat that with, this massive offensive line?
Yep. And, it's kind of interesting to see how that plays out, because we all know Belichick, didn't have the pieces last year. Now he's adding in there. He's going to see what he can do. And it's exciting, to try to see if they can put out something that's fantasy relevant, because last year you weren't really starting anything for New England. Moving over to the Jets. Obviously, Jets aren't exciting, but Corey Davis now gets that 3-year, $37.5 million contract, potentially jumping in as the wide receiver 1 there in New York. Is Corey Davis trending in the right direction now? He ended up having a low-key breakout in year 5. Now he's going to go to an offense where he likely, will see more volume, especially with some negative game script than he saw there, in Tennessee, Mom.
I'm the wrong person to ask, because I'm not a Corey Davis guy. To me, his mini breakout last year, credit to him, but a lot of the defensive attention was focused on Derrick Henry and AJ Brown. And I just don't know if he can be that number 1 guy And on top of that, the Jets have a ton of draft capital in the first 2 days, and I could still see them adding another wide receiver. I think Rashad Bateman I think they have 23 or 24 overall, something like that. That would make a lot of sense if he drops there. So for me, I'm staying away from Davis, and I would sell for, an early second or better.
Yeah, if you can get that, I'm selling all day. Jeremy, any thoughts on Corey Davis?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of the same way with Mung, that I don't believe he's a true number one. I think his breakout was, like Mung said, a benefit of that offense and a benefit of A.J. Brown. But I think it was just interesting because technically he didn't finish his highest wide receiver finish of his career because he finished 26th in 2018. But what's crazy to think is that he only had 173 fantasy points that year. And then this year he had 182 and he was the 32nd wide receiver. So that's just telling you like how crazy the fantasy, like the wide receiver pool is getting so deep that for me, even as a number one receiver, it's going to be hard for him to crack the top 24 there. I think I don't see him as a true number one. I would have liked to see him go to like Green Bay or somewhere that he could have been that second option like he was in Tennessee. I think that would have been the best for him fantasy wise, at least.
Totally agree. Let's move on to the AFC North here. Baltimore, not much going. Josh Oliver acquired in the trade with the Jaguars. Oliver was someone to, in 2 tight end leagues and even back end dynasty leagues as a stash, was a guy that looked like he was going to get an opportunity and something worth monitoring. Bengals, again, not much either there. Like they're not doing a lot trying to sign things. I mean, re-sign Brandon Allen, nothing exciting. And, the pretty much the entire division hasn't made any moves. Do you see any of these teams right now? What kind of moves do you see them making? I mean, obviously, is Pittsburgh going to make a push in for a running back? What do we see in that situation? Is Baltimore going to make a push for one of these wide receivers? Cincinnati, obviously, they need to beef up the offensive line, but hasn't been a lot of signing. What are some moves that you guys want to see from this division?
I think that, if anything, I think Pittsburgh goes the route of a rookie running back. I think, if I remember, the cap situation isn't the greatest. And I think that's their best strategy. Either that or maybe they'll bring Connor back. I really don't think they will. I just don't. But they're going to lean towards that cheaper option. But a lot of the cheaper running backs are kind of coming off the board already. So I think they might have just looked at it and they're going to say, we're just going to go with one of these younger running backs. And I think that's probably their route. But I agree. I wish I would have seen, with all these offensive linemen getting cut, released, and traded, I really wish the Bengals would have made a move there. Yeah. I think they're a couple offensive linemen away from having at least a more competitive team. Other than that, I think Auden Tate's possibly going to get a chance unless they draft a wide receiver, because this class is pretty deep. I think
the Bengals offense, I mean, if they get an offensive line, I mean, priority one has to be keeping Joe Burrow upright. But we know that there's exciting pieces there. I mean, there's a lot of potential to go into that offense. You'd think they would be a lot more committed to trying to make sure Joe Burrow stays safe.
Yeah, you would think. But, I mean, maybe they're trying. I mean, the prices I don't know. I just feel like it seems like some of these guys got signed fairly cheap, and I think they could have at least been in on it. But there's still some guys left, so they might still be making some moves.
Mung, what's the one signing you want to see out of this division? Like, where do you want to see?
Not Kenny Golladay to Cincinnati. I don't think it'd be the end of the world, but certainly if you have T. Higgins or Tyler Boyd, that's not what you're hoping for. And then there are rumblings that the Bengals might grab Jamar Chase at 5, but I really do think they're going to go with Sewell or Slater. They just, like you said, their priority or their top priority needs to be keeping Joe Burrow healthy, and he's coming off of the ACL, and the last thing that they want to do, is let him get hit a lot and lose that confidence coming back. And then I did want to mention too the Josh Oliver trade to Baltimore. That's kind of interesting for deeper leagues. I don't think he's going to be very fantasy relevant, but just a name to kind of monitor. He was pretty interesting coming out of college. And then also, they do like to use those multiple tight end sets. So he'll see some looks.
Let's move over to the AFC South here. I was, start with the Houston Texans. I mean, the big news, Deshaun Watson, he wants to sit out. Now all of a sudden, he potentially sit out, hold out, once traded. And now we get 4 accusations of sexual assault and things like that. I mean, or not assault, but I should say sexual harassment. I mean, Deshaun Watson may have just put himself in a situation where he's got to suit up week 1. I mean, what are you guys hearing from Deshaun Watson, all the things that have been coming out in the last couple of days? And what do you think that does for this situation? Because we have a lot of guys in Superflex leagues where, I've seen him fall into mid to late first in some of these Superflex startups because people are like, well, I'm not sure if he's going to start, right off the bat. And when he's playing, he's right up there, in that tier right underneath Patrick Mahomes. I mean, Deshaun Watson has balled out.
Yeah, I don't think I would drop him very far in startups. Probably to the back end of that tier, along with Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, Dak Prescott, just because the situation is so uncertain that you might not get him for half or all of the season this coming year. I do think that's a concern if you're a contender. So perhaps look into, a Watson for like a Tannehill, DJ Shark, and a early second, something like that. A package where you're getting a reliable quarterback, right? But in terms of will he get traded, I don't know. I do think that if he doesn't, he'll sit out. And to me, I think that, this recent news with the sexual harassment or whatever it is, that's kind of a dirty play by the Houston organization. I mean, this just reeks of some trying to, force his hand, kind of like when Dez Bryant, there was some videotape of him in Walmart's back when the Cowboys and him were trying to work out a deal. And it just, I think that if it wasn't already set in stone, this was the last straw for him. I mean, he's out of there. He's not playing another snap for Houston.
Based off all the videos I see of people of Walmart.com, and every time I go to Walmart, if I was a multi-million-dollar football player, I'm not setting foot in Walmart anyways. I'm trying to avoid that scenario. Yeah, I almost go to Target just so I can spend a little bit more to stay away from the riffraff. No problems with Walmart, but just kind of getting a little dig in there. So, Mark, at the Dynasty Lefty, couldn't come on here tonight, but he did just drop a little line here that says, Watson to the Niners, that would blow our minds, right? I mean, Deshaun Watson to the Niners would be amazing, but we can have that pipe dream, but it doesn't look like he's going anywhere, Jeremy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that for the price that I heard that Seattle turned the Bears down for Russell Wilson, I do not see Deshaun Watson getting traded. I just think that his price tag has to be too high. And I think Houston, if they do trade him, are going to try and recover what Bill O'Brien did with DeAndre Hopkins and Laramie Tunsil. Yeah. So, I mean, I get the situation. He doesn't want to play there. Now with the sexual assaults or harassments, and I just feel like he's going to be untradeable at this point just because of what organization's going to give him away. Nobody's going to give him away. Like you said, he's a top tier quarterback in the NFL. He's still young, and Mung might be right. He might not play it down this year, but I just can't see. But I see if he doesn't play this year, I mean, he might get traded just because Houston has to do something. I mean, you can't just let this quarterback sit on the bench that is a top 5 quarterback in the NFL possibly. So,
well, you said that about Seattle. I mean, let's talk about that for a little bit. So the rumor is that Chicago offered 3 firsts, I believe a third, and 2 starters for Russell Wilson. Now let's play like devil's advocate a little bit here. I mean, if you're the Texans and you hear that, this is a situation they're not in a quick fix. You know what I mean? I mean, they're in a situation where if you get that kind of capital for Deshaun Watson, I mean, should they be moving that kind of thing? And it's like the Bears fans, you had to be so excited to hear names like Deshaun Watson, names like Russell Wilson, and then they sign Andy Dalton. So let's talk a little bit about, the potential if that actually did happen. And then let's transition a little bit into Andy Dalton signing with the Bears. Mung, you're out there in Chicago. Talk to me a little bit.
Yeah, well, real quick, back on Houston. The reason I do think that Watson will get traded is because they have Nick Caserio now, who came from the Patriots organization. He knows how to run a good organization, or at least how it should be run. And the question is whether the Houston's ownership is really going to allow him to make the moves that he wants to make, because we saw what happened with Trent Williams in Washington, where, they dicked around until they got nothing for him. And that's the last thing that you want with an asset like Deshaun Watson. Moving on to Chicago, as a Chicagoan, I hate this so much. I mean, it made all the sense in the world that, Pace and Nagy just needed to go after this past season. And, basically they kicked the can down the road. They're giving them, they're letting them, finish out their contracts, but it's just going to hurt the franchise more in the long run. And it's another lost year. Who knows if Allen Robinson's going to sit out or not, whether it's Andy Dalton or Nick Foles. This franchise just has no direction. And, maybe the only beneficiary here is Darnell Mooney, who is going to get a ton of target volume if Allen Robinson sits out.
Yeah, I mean, Allen Robinson obviously signs the franchise tag. We've been talking about on the podcast for months now about Allen Robinson finally getting an opportunity to play with a good quarterback, potentially, right? I mean, he's had Mitch Trubisky, he's had Nick Foles, he's had Blake Bortles, and we're like, all right, somebody might, he's got this opportunity. They franchise tag him and then bring in Andy Dalton, who might actually be the best quarterback he's still played with, but it's just a sad situation. We wanted Allen Robinson to get that opportunity to get out there. And Darnell Mooney's a guy we've been talking about a lot, to stash, and we were trading on playoff teams, trying to grab him for third round picks last year. Now that ship has sailed, but it's still definitely worth picking up. Another quarterback situation, staying in the same division, the Carson Wentz trade finally goes through today. What does that do? And then Marlon Mack re-signed with the Colts, which I was picking up Marlon Mack on the cheap all over the place, thinking maybe he signed somewhere as like a secondary running back who's going to get a decent opportunity. Now he's clearly just a handcuff. But let's talk about both of these guys. I mean, let's talk about this Colts situation. What does Carson Wentz bring to the Colts offense, and what does that do for Pittman and the other wide receivers there, as well as Jonathan Taylor, Jeremy?
Yeah, I mean, to me, Indianapolis is my go-to for Kenny Golladay. I'd really like him to go here. I think an ad with Golladay and then Pittman on the outside, Paris Campbell playing the slot. Then you've got Jonathan Taylor, now Marlon Mack, and Nyheim Hines. I think that offense could definitely be potent. I think Carson Wentz, personally, I don't know if he's necessarily broken. I think he's fixable, at least to a fantasy aspect. I think Frank Reich can kind of right his ship a little bit. And, I mean, you saw what that offense did with Phillip Rivers, and, I mean, he can't be much worse than Phillip Rivers. Now, he had a great career, but last year he was not in his right mind. He looked like Breeze was last year, too, where they both just kind of looked like it was that time for them to go. So I just think that Carson Wentz just instantly bumps Michael Pittman. I think he's going to bump whoever else they bring in, and I think the tight ends, too, is going to be somebody to watch. Is Doyle still under contract? I don't know if anybody knows. Yeah. So, I mean, you still have Doyle. I know they tendered Mo Alie-Cox too. So, I mean, those two could be good, like second to third tight end options on a deeper league or a tight end premium league, because Wentz does like his tight ends. So I think no matter what, I think the Wentz is a big bump for all of the receiving options. And as far as Marlon Mack goes, I'm a little afraid that they want to kind of run what they did with Jonathan Williams. And I think they might just run with like the hot hand. And I think Jonathan Taylor is still going to get most of the work because he's just clearly the most talented back there. I mean, Marlon Mack is good. I mean, he's not bad, but he's coming off an Achilles injury, which for a running back is a little dicey. And I think Taylor's going to win out, but I just see that his ceiling might not be as high as we had hoped this year.
Yeah, and Mung, I mean, we talked about this, right, when there was rumor of the Carson Wentz trade, and all offseason I was talking about, hey, the Colts seemed like the ideal situation, you know what I mean? And we're like, and you were like, hey, I don't think it's going to work with the contract, and it probably shouldn't have, right? But now Carson Wentz goes to that ideal situation where when Frank Reich was there in Philadelphia as the OC, that was when Carson Wentz was at his best. And I agree with Jeremy that he's not broken. He's definitely fixable. Now, I took him in Listener League 2 in the 9th round as my QB2, and that's the 19th quarterback off the board in a 2-quarterback league. What kind of upside are we looking here for Carson Wentz? I mean, before the season started, I had him last year as my QB7. Now I'm a little bit, closer to Philadelphia. I was pretty excited. Where do you think we can slot him in the Superflex rankings right now? I mean, I have him, probably in that 14 to 16 range. What are you guys seeing, and what kind of range do you see for Carson Wentz?
Yeah, in Dynasty, as of right now, I have him as the QB 15. So I have him just above Tua and Hurts, because I think in this tier of quarterbacks, you're looking at a lot of upside, but you're also looking at potentially, if it's one poor year for whatever reason, injury or otherwise, they may not be a starter in 2022. And that's the only concern here, is that they could be volatile assets, but certainly, it's good for Pittman. It's good for the entire offense. It's certainly an upgrade over Rivers, as Jeremy said. And then I'm actually a little bit down on Paris Campbell because they tendered Zach Pascal, who had a lot of slot work. And so I just don't know if Campbell can get up to speed on the outside. He still has to develop after losing 2 years due to injury. So I'm probably selling him now, even though I was pretty optimistic on him going into the offseason. And then with Jonathan Taylor, as Jeremy said, the ceiling is the concern, right? Everyone knows that Taylor's the starter. They're not going to give a ton of snaps to Marlon Mack, but Nyheim Hines is the issue here, because Frank Reich has shown us that he still wants to run a committee of sorts, dating back to his time in Philadelphia. I'm sure you know that, Mike. And so, I remember a recent Twitter poll of Dalvin Cook versus Jonathan Taylor if you're a contender, and I would stick with Cook because Minnesota's shown that they're willing to use him as a 3-down workhorse, injury concerns aside, and we just don't know quite yet about Taylor, and that's why I'm hesitant to put him in that top 3, top 4 dynasty running back range just yet.
Yeah, and I mean, if you want to build a contending team right off the bat, I'm seeing Dalvin Cook fall into that second round consistently, where he's just moving his way back, and he's still got a lot left in there. So I like that. I like all the assessments there of Indianapolis, right, where you guys have the quarterbacks pretty much nailed it the whole way across there. Zach Pascal is a nice little piece that you can add in the last couple rounds of your dynasty startup. I mean, I've been adding him. I got him in a couple of leagues that don't have strict rules as far as waivers. They got free agents. I've added him on there. He's someone who's, when he gets an opportunity, the guy has produced. I mean, it's nothing exciting, but he's a decent bye-week fill-in that you can get there at the end.
Yeah, he can be what Greg Ward was, right? He'll have a few spot starts.
Yeah, you're naming that was the last pick of my last draft was Greg Ward. You just throw him in there at the end. Let's move over to Jacksonville. Obviously Urban Meyer's there. He goes and gets another Ohio State running back. Gets Carlos Hyde on a 2-year, $6 million deal to obviously back up James Robinson. They agree to sign Philip Dorsett. He's kind of neither here nor there anymore. Marvin Jones is an interesting deal, though. Short-term deal worth $7 million a year. So they go out there and they get another wide receiver. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence is going to be there. So now we get Carlos Hyde. Always been decent in pass protection. Looks like they're just trying to build a couple weapons here, make Trevor Lawrence a little bit more, comfortable when he comes in. They franchise tag Cam Robinson. They go out and sign Tyler Shatley. I mean, there's a lot of things they're trying to do to make Trevor Lawrence a lot more comfortable when he first starts out here, Mom.
Yeah, and I know everyone's excited about Trevor Lawrence, but you kind of have to pick and choose your spots, because I'm seeing so much hype about DJ Shark, about Laviska Shenault, James Robinson, and now Marvin Jones. And it's like, well, right.
You got to pick one. It can't be all of them. He's not.
I mean, to an extent, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's good for all, the rising tide that lifts all boats, but they can't all be fantasy studs. So for me, I'm prioritizing DJ Shark and James Robinson. I don't think the Carlos Hyde signing is very concerning at all. If anything, that's good news in that they're probably not going to draft another running back early. So to me, Shark and Robinson are the two guys I would be looking at in that offense. Jones will be fine. He'll be that spot start, wide receiver 3 flex with upside. But again, it's going to take time for them to build chemistry, right? Because he and Stafford had that kind of mental chemistry. And I just don't know if it's going to be their year one. And then Laviska Shenault, amazing athlete. I know people are excited about him, but he's still kind of that gadget slot guy. And, he needs to stay healthy. And I'm just not quite there. I'm seeing him valued as a first-round rookie pick in a lot of places, and that's not where I'm at.
I mean, you have to look at what Jacksonville's doing is trying to beef up that defense. I mean, they go and get 4 or 5 guys on the offensive line. Obviously the big signing is Roy Robertson Harris. They go and they get Shaquille Griffin. I mean, they get Rayshawn Jenkins. They're really trying to beef up that defense, which was a mess. I mean, we know that. But they have a lot of, potential to move around here. It's going to be an ugly year one. But I think Trevor Lawrence obviously is the truth. I think he has a great ceiling. Jeremy, where do you have him ranked in your dynasty rankings as far as Superflex? I mean, everyone seems to be pushing him up there where he's literally going right after Deshaun Watson, isn't it, as like the QB6. But where do you guys have him ranked right now? You know, I have talked to a couple of my friends. Riley Bymaster says I wouldn't be taking him in the top 12 as far as quarterbacks. I mean, where should we be comfortable slotting him in right now?
That's tough for me. I think I was very surprised. I mean, right now it's ADP. I mean, in all the startups that I've done in January for some crazy reason, are like right at the end of the first round. And he's going, I want to say just after, like you said, just after Deshaun Watson and honestly before Burrow and before some of those other guys. And that's a little too high for me. Trust me, I grind rookie film. I love rookies. I love college players. I love all of that. All the hype is great. For me, I need to see it. And especially quarterbacks concern me coming out of college because as much as we want to argue talent over landing spot for quarterbacks, you could argue the other way, that the landing spot is key because 90% of their game is in their head. And if they don't have that right system or they don't have the right coaching or like you had said, where they don't set up a team to help say that quarterback do what he's good at, it definitely could taint him and or just ruin him. I mean, you could use Sam Darnold. As Darnold came out, he was a really high prospect. I mean, he looked great. Jared Goff. I mean, how many of these first overall picks that just went into teams that were just so bad that it just didn't work? So I'm not saying that Trevor Lawrence is going to be a bust. For me, I'm going to take somebody who's already established. I mean, I would probably start taking him when you have guys probably after Burrow. I think once Burrow goes, that's probably where I would start.
If he fell there to when Burrow, but I'm seeing him go above Herbert. I'm seeing him go above Dak. I feel like we're all just excited. We have that rookie fever. Most of us realize we don't have the 101 anywhere because we're savvy enough owners because we listen to this show. But we don't have that 101. You're like, I can't get Trevor Lawrence, so I'm going to just try to take him way too early in the rookie draft. Yeah. And we never had this in the past as much where we're like last year you weren't hearing about people taking, those players that high. Joe Burrow was nowhere near that high when it came to startups. So, I mean, I want to believe in the truth. I'm probably not ever going to get any Trevor Lawrence shares here. I feel like the price tag seems a little outrageous right now. Where do you have him in your current rankings?
Yeah, I think where you guys said is about right in that Burrow-Herbert range, right? And perhaps I could even see the argument for Lawrence over Burrow given, the concerns with the knee, and then perhaps over Herbert too, just because we know that Urban Meyer's likely going to have Lawrence running quite a bit. That's how you get those fantasy points on the ground. Yeah. So I could see him, over those guys. If you're really concerned about Deshaun Watson, maybe, but probably not for me. He's in that, in between that Deshaun Watson, Lamar Jackson, and then Herbert Burrow. So between those two tiers for me, right in there.
Or if you're Billy, who sent in one of his pictures from his draft, he took Rondale Moore at 103 in the startup. Did you guys see that in the group chat? I saw that on Twitter. It was 101 Mahomes, 102 Josh Allen, 103 Rondale Moore. He said you got to get your guy. Definitely not advocating that, guys. You could probably wait another 12 rounds before you go and jump in there. And again, we'll probably talk about that when Angelo comes on about Rondale Moore, and you guys know John gushes about him. Let's move over to Tennessee. Not a lot going on there. I mean, other than the only offensive signing, they signed Jeff Swain, and then Anthony Firkser gets his opportunity, right? Jonnu's out. We've seen some flashes with him in the past where when Jonnu sat, Firkser was a guy who jumped in and put up some decent numbers. Clearly, they're going to be drafting some wide receivers, but with Corey Davis leaving, I was just gushing again about A.J. Brown again. I do it all the time. I feel like A.J. Brown, if we can get him up to 150 target area, he's going to really produce top-end wide receiver one. That's why I have him as my dynasty wide receiver one. People yell at me about that all the time, but sky's the limit for him. Talk to me a little bit about Brown if you want to earn some brownie points with me. If not, let's talk Firkser a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I have Firkser in a couple spots. I grabbed him last year. I didn't grab him now. But I think I'm not super sold on him just yet. It's kind of like I believe it was a 1 year kind of prove it type deal.
Yeah.
I want to see what the draft brings. I'm curious to see if they draft a tight end. I don't know because obviously they're going to have to replace Corey Davis, but I think they might. I think if you get a guy like Breven Jordan or Hunter Long or Pat Firemouth that kind of fall to them, they might take them because obviously I don't know how much they believe in Firkser just giving him that 1 year deal.
Yeah, and he's a guy, and if you play in one of those devilish 2 tight end leagues, which if you do, you are a glutton for pain, because I tried it for a couple years. I hated it, and that was when we had the tight end position isn't anywhere near what it is now. Even if they do take a rookie, he could potentially produce here for a year, and a guy that's maybe worth throwing out a pair of 4s or throwing out a late 3rd here if you're really in need for a starter. Mung, what did you see from him this year?
Yeah, and I talked about Firkser and my tight ends to buy before free agency article for just this reason, expecting Jonnu to move on. But, I did mention that his upside is probably capped. He'll be a decent tight end 2 option, I think, simply because Tannehill does like targeting his tight ends a lot in the red zone. But athletically, Firkser isn't anything to write home about. So really, it's going to rely on touchdowns. Now, his upside, I will say, is like Robert Tonyan, right? Tonyan's nothing special, but 16 touchdowns. And I don't think that Firkser is going to get anywhere near that, but 8 or 9, that's certainly doable depending on what weapons they decide to add. And Mike, I'm with you on A.J. Brown. I love him for this year. I do think that 150 targets is possible. He was the wide receiver 17 in PPR last year, and that was with missing 2 games and playing on a bum knee all year. So healthy A.J. Brown, sign me up.
That's where I'm at. I'm glad you talked about Robert Tonyan because we're running a little bit short on time. But, Green Bay, what they did in this offseason has really just made their draft one of the worst drafts imaginable, right? First round, we trade up and get Jordan Love. Second round, you get A.J. Dillon. Third round, you take Josiah DeGuara. And we get into a situation where now you're like, Rodgers isn't going anywhere, And then we're like, this is A.J. Dillon's breakout, right? He looked great when he got his opportunities. And then they go and spend $48 million on Aaron Jones. DeGuara was the guy that was supposed to come in, and then they never really let Tonyan really, jump in there. It has to be one of the worst drafts possible when we're talking about situations where they could have loaded up at that wide receiver position, which is what they really need. Green Bay, what are we doing here with Aaron Jones? What are we doing with A.J. Dillon? What are we doing with Tonyan? What are we doing with this whole offense? Where aside from Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers, what's the play here, guys?
Man, just
that's a loaded question, right? But it was like I'm sitting here before I jumped on. I was talking to my buddy, and I'm like, I love Aaron Jones, but now what? Are they gonna what's gonna happen here? We got so excited about Aaron Jones going to Miami or going to San Francisco and having A.J. Dillon, and if you drafted them and had them together handcuffed. I love that situation where you have 2 guys together and one of them leaves and then you get 2 starters out of it. Now it's like, what's going on?
Well, would you rather be a Packers fan and make the playoffs every year, but then, get knocked out? Or would you rather be a Lions fan and not have that hope and then, not have that crushing heartbreak when they do lose in the playoffs? And
we'll have to ask Commissioner Breeze. He's that Lions fan. Every year he's talking about like little things with the Lions, and I'm like, it don't matter. It's okay.
Yeah, and that, so frustrating because I was very high on A.J. Dillon because if you think, what are the rational moves that the Packers would do, it would be to let him walk, especially paired with the rumors that he was getting interest for $12, $13 million a year. Instead, it's hard to predict these things, but I'll stand by my estimation or my projection for Jones leaving because I think it made all the sense in the world, except, sometimes you just lose. And I think the odds were good that Jones left, but, taking that hometown discount to stay, and then also the Packers, for some reason, paying a running back when they have so many other needs on the secondary for offensive line depth, I just didn't understand it. But obviously Jones remains in that back end RB1 range. And then Dillon, I've dropped him to that tier of, like Tony Pollard, Gus Edwards, those guys who can be flex plays on a weekly basis with RB1 upside if the starters ahead of him were to miss any time.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking Jones contracts, $48 million, 13 in signing bonuses, taking $20 million a year each of the first 2 years, and then it's like they can get out after that. But I mean, it's made it a situation that I know I was really telling people in startups to be hesitant with AJ Dillon, and he went in the leagues. You know, I did 3 startups. I did one with each of you guys. He went in the 6th, the 8th, and the 9th, respectively, and it's like, wow. You know, you basically way overpaid, gave up almost. People were trading first round picks there, and it's like now it's completely out of the scenario, and it's kind of interesting to see how this shakes out and what it does for the value of these players. Jeremy, let's talk a little bit about Robert Tonyan. You know, I'm getting a lot of questions on Twitter about Robert Tonyan. I mean, is he the value is still there? I mean, people are not still putting him up in that top 10 to 12 range of tight ends because it was so touchdown heavy. I mean, are you willing to right now? He's still that number 2 target in Green Bay until they come up with something else.
Yeah, I mean, they still have Jace Sternberger, which everybody probably forgets about. But I don't know. I'm not big on Tonyan. I never was. I mean, he performed last year. I mean, you can't say he didn't, but he put up numbers like you guys had mentioned, that 16 touchdowns. The chances of that reoccurring, I think, are highly unlikely. I think he will firmly be around 10. So I do think
8 to 10 touchdowns feel very realistic.
Yeah.
And that puts you on the tight end 1 map.
For me, I mean, I'd take that risk on Tonyan over, say, Hunter Henry or Jonnu Smith, in my personal opinion. I just think that he has a clearer role. I think that they're all in that same range. I think once you drop off those top 3, it's anybody's game. You know what I mean? You could have Irv Smith be a top 5 tight end this year. You could have Adam Troutman be one. I mean, who knows? I mean, like that gap between 5 and 10 is like 30, 40 PPR points usually. So,
and I saw Mung get really triggered when you said him over Jonnu Smith there.
I know I'm hating on him hard right now. I probably shouldn't be. I'm probably going to eat my words by like the end of the year next year, but
I'm on it as well. I mean, if you don't get those top 3, and I always talk about this, I wait late for my tight end, you know, and I end up taking the guys like Logan Thomas, and I end up getting a bunch of guys that just have, you know, some value in there, because I feel like once people take those top 3, then we really start stretching, right? We push up Hunter Henry and we push up Noah Fant, and, you know, we start pushing guys up way earlier than they should, not for the value that they are, but for the positional need, instead of waiting guys like Logan Thomas, like Robert Tonyan. Those are the guys that I keep finding myself taking in startups because they're falling to decent values.
Yeah, I mean, one guy I was high on him last year too was Hayden Hurst. I don't think he came like as high as he could have last year, but I think this year too, I mean, he's got Arthur Smith. I mean, we saw what he did with Jonnu and stuff in Tennessee. Maybe, I mean, he could again have a good chance at getting a decent breakout, and he's a guy you can get in 10, 11th round and
he's on Team Ginger, which I'm always a fan of, you know. Like I end up like, I mean, Jonnu's the most expensive tight end I've bought in all the startups, but I keep finding myself getting like Austin Hooper for nothing and Jimmy Graham in the 20-something round, you know, where he was still a back end tight end 1. Not advocating Jimmy Graham's going to, you know, lead you to the promised land or anything like that, but just more of the, if you don't get those big 3, wait, you know, and it should be interesting. Speaking of tight ends, Philadelphia seems to be completely, you know, Zach Ertz is out of the way. Zach Ertz rumor I'm hearing is the Chiefs right now. So, Mung, would that give him some fantasy value back and give you an opportunity to get out on Zach Ertz, or would that be something where you'd be willing to buy in and say, you know, Zach Ertz could be relevant again?
Oh yeah, I mean, that would be basically an ideal landing spot, right? I mean, anytime you get to play with Patrick Mahomes, that elevates your fantasy stock. But even in other spots, I do think that Ertz can still be, you know, a decent plug-and-play tight end too. He'll get you a touchdown here and there, and that's all you can really ask for, like you said, outside of that elite tier of tight ends. So, sure, I do think for the price that he's going for, you can probably get him for a late second right now.
And staying in that same thing, I know I've been talking Logan Thomas a lot, but the Washington football team goes out and signs Ryan Fitzpatrick to a 1-year, $10 million deal. So that's got to, you know, increase his stock a little bit, get a go there. Then they go and they sign Curtis Samuel, which is, you know, they finally have a guy to pair up with Terry McLaurin. Curtis Samuel signs a 3-year, $34 million deal. So paid like a decent wide receiver, someone that's going out there. People loved him in Carolina. Talk to me about Curtis Samuel, the wide receiver position there overall in Washington, Mung, because it was one that we wanted to talk about quite a bit. Is what happens if Terry McLaurin gets a competent wide receiver 2 next to him? What happens if they get a wide receiver, a quarterback where Ryan Fitzpatrick has elevated wide receiver 1s over the past, to really just pushing them to the next level with targets?
Yeah, well, I'll start this off with, I know a lot of people don't want to hear this, but the odds of Ryan Fitzpatrick starting the entire season are incredibly low.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
For that reason,
when he plays, it's fun, right? It's Fitzmagic. I mean, I saw someone tweeted out, they're like, can we get him to the Pro Bowl so he has a chance to be in the Hall of Fame? I mean, what's he been on, like 16 teams? The beard is iconic, him coming out to the podium dressed in Deshaun Jackson gear just gets me excited. I hope Washington signs Deshaun Jackson just so we can see that again.
Didn't he go to Harvard?
He did.
Mm-hmm. He has the highest Wonderlic score ever. He's brilliant, but that beard makes him look just like a, kind of a blue collar worker. I mean, he's great. I love Ryan Fitzpatrick. I didn't love him when he was in Buffalo. We can admit that, Jeremy. It was like, he's all right, But let's talk about the rest of the wide receivers here, Mom.
Yeah, I mean, I love Fitzmagic for the memes and, the Conor McGregor look, and he certainly can help elevate the fantasy stock of these wide receivers. But I do want to mention that I'm buying Taylor Heineke because I think that he's going to be the starter at some point this year. And he flashed enough in the playoff loss to Tampa Bay that I think that he could, be decent. I don't know that he's going to be a long-term starter in the league, but we've seen Washington produce guys before, like Kirk Cousins behind RG3. So who knows? But certainly I like McLaurin. I think Samuel stays in that wide receiver 3 range. I don't know how much they're looking to throw. They've made a lot of additions to that defense, even more so than the offense. And I think that this is going to be a balanced team that's going to be looking to run a lot more. And for that reason, I'm down on J.D. McKissic as well.
Okay. All right. Now let's move over to the South here. I mean, we have to talk about the NFC South. We have to talk about the New Orleans Saints, right? We've all been, everyone seems to be on one side or the other here. We kind of thought Drew Brees was going to retire. Then we saw a video of him with hair somehow pushing a sled, like what's going on? Drew Brees is getting hair plugs, Drew Brees retired. I mean, he's been so exciting to watch over the years. He's been the staple of consistency. That offense has really just thrived under him. And we saw when he was out, it wasn't the same with Taysom Hill. Everyone's all like looking at this Taysom Hill contract and not breaking it down further. They're like 4 years, $140 million, but basically they can get out of it, at any point here. It's just kind of a sweetheart deal to cut $7.5 million off their cap so they can sign some more, free agents here. Jameis Winston signs a 1-year, $5.5 million deal, basically another kind of prove it thing, has a max value of $12.5 million. So both of you guys pick a side here. I mean, is it going to be Jameis starting week 1? Is it going to be Taysom Hill? And what does this mean for the other pieces in the offense? I mean, I feel like Jameis coming to town, if he's the starter, I think Michael Thomas gets an instant boost in comparison to where Taysom Hill is. But talk to me a little bit more about Kamara, some of the other pieces in this. And then obviously with Jared Cook leaving, what happens at the tight end position, Jeremy?
Yeah, I mean, for me, if we're going to go with the quarterbacks, I'm picking Winston. I think
it's more fun though, right?
He's more fun. He's just, he's going to be eating W's there. And I think that the struggle is which Winston are we getting? I mean, he had one good year in 2019 that he was a QB4. Other than that, he's been mediocre at best as far as fantasy goes. So I think he leans closer to the QB2 range. I don't know if he'll produce that QB4 again that he did with Tampa.
Well, let's talk about that real quick. So Drew Brees was incredibly accurate, and he could stay zoned in. That when Taysom Hill got subbed in, I mean, Drew Brees is that professional. He's going to keep doing it, right? Can Jameis Winston do that though? I mean, if we start taking Jameis Winston out on plays, and we know his psyche's been up and down at times, and he's been turnover prone. If we start, he's the starter, and Taysom Hill's coming in and out. I mean, what does that do to Jameis Winston?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. He's the biggest. He's probably the most polarizing quarterback right now, in my opinion. Like, you're either going to get a QB4 or you're going to get the 30 interceptions with not 30 touchdowns because he doesn't have that talent around him that he did in Tampa Bay. I mean, yeah, he's still got Michael Thomas, but outside of that, he's got some unproven wide receivers on the edge, and you have Adam Troutman, who's still not proven. But for me, I mean, the biggest hit here, no matter who starts, is Kamara, and I have been advocating it all off season, and I know people are probably like, you're crazy, but for me, I was moving Kamara if I owned him, because I just think that for me, he can run the ball. He's not an incapable of physically running, but he gets all his points through the dump offs from Drew Brees. And I think if it's Hill, he's going to take off running. If it's Winston, he's going to just throw it into triple coverage. So there's the struggle for me is Kamara. I don't know if he's going to finish as high as his value is, where you're getting him in startups and or trading for him.
You just made up for Mung. Like, Mung was triggered when you were bashing John a little bit. Now he's smiling over there. So in the startup we just did at the Dynasty Lefty, my brother took Christian McCaffrey, fell all the way to 108. At the 207, Kamara came back to him. So like
what?
The Kamara, yeah, I know, right? Like I was like, I don't even know how. Like, the quarterback run went crazy, and then people were like, we got to get more in there. We got to get, I ended up. I had Josh Allen at the 102, and then I traded up from my third round into that early first, late second area, because we found from our draft that it kind of tapers off and quarterbacks disappear. And I had the intention of grabbing one of these quarterbacks. They go crazy. I end up getting Jonathan Taylor at 201. I'm so excited I can't even talk about who I got at 201. But then Kamara falls all the way to 207, so he's fallen into that second round now.
I mean, I've seen Dalvin Cook. I got Dalvin Cook in a couple at like 2.6, 2.1. Yeah. I mean, I've seen Cook fall. Kamara usually is still up there. But absolutely. I mean, you're right that the listener leagues were crazy. I mean, with the 14-team league, I think I got Burrow. I thought I was sitting at 1.8. I'm like, this is great. I'll have like Dak. I'll have Watson. I'll have Herbert. I'll have someone there. And then I ended up with like Burrow. And I'm like, I mean, I guess this is all right. But like, I was like, I'd have to take a quarterback after this. It falls off. I'm like, what am I going to do? So
quarterback does fall off, but Jameis went after the 10th round in all of ours.
Yeah.
And Taysom went after I believe, 13th in all of them. Mung, I know you've talked a lot about the Saints offense, but bring it home for us a little bit on that.
Yeah, I'm out on both. I've never been a Jameis Winston believer. I do think that as a pure passer, he's better than Taysom Hill. And I do think that he's going to earn the starting role eventually. But that doesn't preclude Hill from still coming in the red zone. We've seen that Sean Payton likes to just rotate his quarterbacks like he's playing in a super flex league. So he'll probably vulture some touchdowns. And then I'm with Jeremy on Kamara because, that target volume was so key to his PPR points. And then also, I just don't know if this offense is going to be as efficient in general, whether it's Winston or Hill. And, Kamara, I still have him as my dynasty RB7, so it's not anything crazy. But overall, there are a lot of quarterbacks and wide receivers and tight ends that I would take over Kamara. So I actually, based on my rankings, he'd be a third-round startup pick. And so I'm never going to get Kamara there. And I'm fine with it.
And then staying in the same division, I mean, Godwin gets the franchise tag. It's official now. Gronk has been actually re-signed in Tampa Bay. Tom Brady signs till he's 71 years old. They started a petition to not let people over the age of 45 play. They're just trying to get Brady out. Somebody else deserves to win a Super Bowl. The scary thing to me is when quarterbacks change, teams, it's usually year 2 where they have the biggest impact. And if Tom Brady can improve off of last year, I mean, everybody's going to continue to eat. I've never this past year, I've kind of soured a little bit on Godwin. So let's talk a little bit about the skill positions there. We're almost at that hour mark, but quick hitters. Are we buying Evans? Are we buying Godwin? Are they all kind of the same kind of value that we had before? Mung?
Yeah, I had a lot of bets on Tom Brady to win the MVP last year at plus 1,000. I'm going to be putting more money down on him this year. Like you said, year 2 in that offense, they kept the offensive line intact. They kept Godwin. They got Gronk back. We'll see about Antonio Brown, but I don't think that he's a primary piece of that. We'll see about Leonard Fournette, but I think he's replaceable too. So I'm way in on Brady, Evans, and Godwin. The cliff is something to watch for with Brady as much as I love him, but I'm not too worried about 2021.
Jeremy, anything to add to that?
I mean, I agree with Mong on everything. I didn't change any of their value. I think, like you said, Antonio Brown doesn't. I mean, I was never. To me, again, they were another team that I was kind of like avoiding them because of the price tag on the players because of their name value. But I know that Brady's going to spread the ball because 1 week it's going to be Scotty Miller, 1 week it's going to be Tyler Johnson, 1 week it's because he's just going to throw to who's open. So for me, the main target that I want to own in that offense is Tom Brady. Outside of that, Arians is going to rotate the running backs like he did this year. It's going to be a guessing game, and the wide receivers as well. So I'm kind of just Brady's really my guy. After that, the value is too high on the other guys for me to be in on them, but they're not bad pieces to own.
I mean, I'm 3 startups in. I got Mike Evans in every single one of them. Mung, I mean, Mike Evans seems to not be getting the respect of a guy that had 7 straight 1,000-yard seasons and has the opportunity to put up 15 touchdowns year in and year out. And you're getting him at back end wide receiver 2 pricing right now, and going in that 6th, 7th round seems to be the area that he goes. So if you go running back early, quarterback running back early, which we're advocating here at Smash Accept big time, you guys have seen it, those wide receiver values fall, and he's one of those guys in that range. So thanks again for tuning in with us, guys. I mean, it's been a fantastic episode. Great talking shop again. Why don't both of you guys, we'll start with you, Jeremy, tell us where people can find your work, again, what you're working on, and, then we'll move over to Mung and close it out.
Yeah, for sure. You guys can find me on Twitter. It's at PopesFFH. Any of my work, all my writing is at either Yards Per or at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, as well as the Fantasy Scouts. Mostly all my stuff, though, you can find a lot of it, links and everything on Twitter. So,
love it. Keep up the great work. And Mung?
Yeah, and as always, you guys can find my stuff over at Fantrax. Like I said, I'll be coming out with those rookie rankings pretty soon, so stay tuned for that. And then you can find me on Twitter. Ask me any questions you want at FFA_Mung. That's MENG.
We're about to really dive into those rookies. You guys want to tune in about 45 minutes. Angelo from Angelo Analysis. Amazing, amazing guy, because when you talk to him about how he does it from where his work is, talking about sports movements and his website. I don't know if you guys have checked it out, but it is phenomenal. If you guys haven't, check out the show. Thanks again for tuning in. My name's Mike. You can find me at Dynasty_DadFF, and enjoy the process.